Namah Shri Atirajaya Vivekanandasure Sachit Sukhasvarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. We resume after a long time, more than a month and a half. And so we were reading this lecture of Vivekananda called Unity and Diversity. And in the previous lecture he has this critique of the notion of heavens and gods of that sort. So for instance, he talks about these ideas of Indra, Varuna, and shows how basically these are supposed to be designations. The idea being that human beings in those days, this is basically the times of the Rig Vedas, thought of anthropomorphic versions of natural forces. So thunder and lightning and power more generally. Indra is supposed to be the representative god of water, is supposed to be Varuna, etc., etc. But then, essentially what the more thinking people in that community, the conclusion that they came to was that these are essentially titles, just as the managing director of a firm or a chief executive officer, etc., etc. And these are positions occupied by individuals, and those come and they go. So they are names of really positions, nothing more, nothing less. And as such, they are subject to the same laws, maybe in a subtler form, of something arising, sustaining, and then dissolving in course of time. So creation, dissolution, and maintenance and sustenance, all those ideas are equally applicable to these designations, and therefore, there's no real point in setting too much store by these rather primitive ideas of heaven and hell and such like. Yeah? This essentially the point being that this notion of heaven, hell, etc., etc., it's somehow or the other, it's a conjuring of the human mind. Basically, the point being that what is the more common sense explanation of all of this? What happens is that if you look at, life in amongst animals, these are creatures that have to sustain themselves, and each actually subsists on life forms of a different nature. At the most primitive level, there are herbivores who rest whose life depends on energy trapped by plants, so they eat plants. And there are carnivores who eat other animals, and in the process, they basically convert that energy trapped in another being as part of themselves. Now, when human beings form a part of society, this particular kind of brutality, if it continues in society, then people will be killing each other, and the purpose of becoming social animals will be defeated, and therefore some rules need to be put in place, and moral injunctions, ethical injunctions are created so that this larger structure of society is held in place. Not very much more than that. And therefore, this ethical concerns, good, bad, etc., etc., they are not absolute entities. Relative entities with a certain aim. The certain aim being sustenance of society, sustenance of the species, bound together to each other by the structure called society. It's for this larger good that the individual wishes are subordinated. That's the basic rational framework, common sense rational framework behind these various ethical laws that we have in society, which is why we have a policing system which which comes down on people who break laws, etc. The sum and substance of that is that there is no absolute good or absolute bad, but it's a functional system. And so, what that gives rise to is, okay, fine, the question naturally arises, well, we see that there are people who are doing things which are not particularly ethically praiseworthy. In spite of that, they seem to be leading rather comfortable lives. And again, there are people who are ethically very upright. On the other hand, there is suffering that is coming to them. How do we explain that? I mean, this curiosity arises. After all, these the curiosity that arises, the question that arises in people's minds is basically, okay, how is it that so and so is actually being good, yet there is all this bad that is befalling him or her? And conversely, this person seems to be leading a rather licentious life. In spite of that, all kinds of good things seem to be coming to this person. And so, when we cannot really find a common sense, down-to-earth explanation, we come up with manufactured explanations. And somehow or the other, these manufactured narratives have to become part and parcel of a shared narrative amongst the species. And therefore, these things about life after death, etc., those come into being, basically saying that, look, because if such and such thing has not happened, then this accumulation of good and bad is going to carry forth into future lives, or there is going to be somebody with a stick standing in front of you when you die, etc., etc. All kinds of stories are manufactured, and then they are shared in societies, and they start exerting a hold on our minds. And as a result, it's this shared narrative which brings us to be ethical. Brings us to be to say that, okay, no, we will act in a way which is right. What is happening here, and this is really the reason why a fairly large number of thinking people, they seem to discard this kind of manufactured explanation. Reason is, well, all of this seem to be stories without ample empirical evidence. So why should we believe in such narrative? And the solution then, does that mean that one becomes ethically corrupt? No. One needs to find for oneself a deeper, more fundamental explanation, and essentially the explanation is built on such common sense grounds as we live in a society, and therefore, if there is greater concern for our fellow beings, it is in the final count good for me. Even if some personal concerns are forsaken, sacrificed, in the eventual reality, it is something that is beneficial, which means the individual importance that we tend to give ourselves is subordinated to an importance that is given to a larger reality, which is called the species as a whole or life as a whole. This dissolving the individual importance in a larger reality, in some very common sense level, is exactly the purpose of Karma Yoga as it is practiced in this organization or anywhere. We've mentioned this a number of times. Let's say, for example, people work in offices. An office has a particular intent. So somebody works in a hospital, the hospital serves a larger purpose in the larger human society. A scientist working in a laboratory essentially is working towards finding new facts which will be of eventually use to a greater number of people. Similarly, engineers, etc., etc. People working in banks and all the rest of it. Each of these are institutions that are serving a certain larger purpose. And what is happening here is that the individual accords greater importance to this larger institution than to oneself. Once one understands that, then the reason for ethical concerns becomes more grounded in today's reality rather than in some manufactured belief system. This is probably the more rational critique of heavens and other such belief systems today. In any case, this particular paragraph where Vivekananda talks about these gods with various powers, essentially the point being that, look, these cannot be the ultimate aim of enquiry into oneself or into one's place in this larger reality. And so, these tentative explanations that were given in terms of gods like Indra, Varuna, etc., they were found to be inadequate. They are not only found to be inadequate by the thinking individual today, they were found to be inadequate as far back as the time where these writings came into being, became part of human heritage. Okay? So essentially what one is saying is that, look, all things which are caught within this framework of space-time causation is subject to creation, sustenance, dissolution. And if one is trying to get at a foundational explanation of oneself, this is not adequate. In particular, heavens and hells are not what one is really after. These ideas of stories is not what one is after. It might be of value to some people, but that's not what we are after here. Okay, it's fine. We understand that heavens and hells and the fear psychosis that these are supposed to engender is not the basis of ethical concerns. What about ethical concerns themselves? And the next paragraph dwells into the relative nature of these ethical concerns. And this is where we start again. In this world, we find that all happiness is followed by misery as its shadow. Life has its shadow, death. They must go together because they are not contradictory, but two separate existences, not two separate existences, but different manifestations of the same unit. Life and death, sorrow and happiness, good and evil. See, here is actually a greater degree of maturity coming into one's worldview, where these polarities of existence, life and death, two extremes, sorrow and happiness, two extremes, good and bad, two extremes. What is being seen here is these are being seen as twin aspects of the same reality. The dualistic conception that good and evil are two separate entities and that they are both going on eternally is absurd on the face of it. They are the diverse manifestations of one and the same fact, one time appearing as bad and at another time appearing as good. The difference does not exist in kind, but only in degree. They differ from each other in degree of intensity. We find as a fact that the same nerve systems carry good and bad sensations alike. And when the nerves are injured, neither sensation comes to us. If a certain nerve is paralyzed, we do not get the pleasurable feelings that used to come along the wires And at the same time, we do not get the painful feelings either. They are never two, but the same. Again, the same thing produces pleasure and pain at different times of life. The same phenomenon will produce pleasure in one and pain in another. The eating of meat produces pleasure to a man, but pain to the animal which is eaten. There has never been anything which gives pleasure to all alike. Some are pleased, others displeased. So on it will go. Therefore, this duality of existence is denied. And what follows? I told you in my last lecture that we can never have ultimately everything good on this earth and nothing bad. It may have disappointed and frightened some of you, but I cannot help it, and I am open to conviction when I am shown to the contrary. But until that can be proved to me, and I can find that it is true, I cannot say so. So in this particular paragraph, what is being undermined is the absolute nature of ethical concerns, of these polarities of good and bad. What one is being implicitly encouraged to accept is that these polarities are aspects of one's own experience of life itself, and to prefer one to the other in the final count is somewhat silly. It's an acceptance of these polarities that leads to a more mature view of life. Yeah? And that maturing or strengthening of the mind is what one is being encouraged to do here. Yeah? Essentially, recognizing that if I regard myself as alive at this instant and think that this being alive is the good, then at some point of time, death is going to overtake me, and I will be subject to, by my own premises, bad. I'll be subject to bad by whatever standards I have set for myself. What then? The very fact that I am actually alive at this moment recognizes, if I attribute that idea to myself, recognizes that I at some point of time am going to die. Yeah? If at this moment I am feeling great joy or happiness, it follows that there will be instances, experiences where I'll be experiencing lack of joy or being unhappy. What then? Essentially probe deeper into oneself. Look at aspects of one's being which are recognizing this experience of joy and its opposite. What happens is that as one probes deeper and deeper into one's own psyche, then these polarities are no longer seen as polar opposites. A certain acceptance of that, of whatever comes one's way, starts developing. It means that the resistance to bad and the craving for what we call good, the intensity of that starts decreasing, and paradoxically, the mind remains quietly cheerful most of the time. What has happened is that everything is not judged and evaluated in terms of this is good, this is bad, this is joyful, this is painful. This immature jumping of the mind between extremes, this habit becomes quieter, and the mind becomes more poised. It does not attribute too much value to any of these extreme phenomena, Which means, after all, where exactly is this happiness? Is it there outside? The same phenomenon as he describes here. So a lion roving on the savannas of Africa, it'll have to kill wildebeest or gazelles in order to survive. If it does not do that, then it's going to be unhappy. The gazelle or wildebeest or zebra that's going to be killed is not going to be happy on being killed. Which means that there is this interrelationship, there is this larger structure in which what we call bad and good occur simultaneously as good for one, not good for another. Yeah? So, in our own lives, it's easier said about something that we can watch in a program, say in a natural history program. But then we need to look at ourselves and see that these antipodes are happening there in our lives all the time. And so, acceptance of these as part and parcel of one's life, what happens is that it reduces the intensity of mental reaction, also called development of poise. Yeah? So we don't get swept away by various emotions and learn to accept various things as part and parcel of life. And here, so the naive religious sentiment, which was there at a certain point of time, said that what will happen is that because society was set up and gave dictates about something that is good and something that is bad, the natural goal then would have to be that, everything is going to become good and no bad is going to remain. This is the idea, naive idea of what is heaven on earth. Yeah? This is what Vivekananda is arguing against here. The general argument against my statement, and apparently a very convincing one, is this, that in the course of evolution, all that is evil in what we see around us is gradually being eliminated, and the result is that if this elimination continues for millions of years, a time will come when all the evil will have been extirpated and the good alone will remain. This is apparently a very sound argument. Would to God it were true. But there is a fallacy in it, and it is this, that it takes for granted that both good and evil are things that are eternally fixed. It takes for granted that there is a definite mass of evil which may be represented by 100, and likewise of good, and that this mass of evil is being diminished every day, leaving only the good. Yeah? What is he doing here? He's taking a belief system, inquiring into it, and excavating from that belief system something fundamentally that is assumed by all who put forward this kind of a hypothesis. And then he inquires into that hypothesis again. But is it so? The history of the world shows that evil is a continuously increasing quantity as well as good. Take the lowest man. He lives in the forest. His sense of enjoyment is very small, and so also is his power to suffer. His misery is entirely on the sense plane. If he does not get plenty of food, he is miserable. But give him plenty of food and enjoyment and freedom to rove and to hunt, and he is perfectly happy. His happiness consists only in the senses, and so does his misery also. But if that man increases in knowledge, his happiness will increase. The intellect will open to him, and his sense enjoyment will evolve into intellectual enjoyment. He will feel pleasure in reading a beautiful poem, and a mathematical problem will be of absorbing interest to him. But with these the inner nerves will become more and more susceptible to miseries of mental pain, of which the savage does not think. Take a very simple illustration. In Tibet, there is no marriage. This is one particular sect that he is talking about. And there is no jealousy, yet we know that marriage is a much higher state. The Tibetans have not known the wonderful enjoyment, the blessing of chastity, the happiness of having a chaste, virtuous wife or a chaste, virtuous husband. These people cannot feel that. And similarly, they do not feel the intense jealousy of the chaste wife or husband or the misery caused by unfaithfulness on either side, with all the heart-burnings and sorrows which believers in chastity experience. On one side, the latter gain happiness, but on the other, they suffer misery too. The particular example here is not that significant. What he is trying to illustrate is what we regard in a particular society as something that is ethical, something that is developed, something that is refined. It gives rise to joy, and its absence gives rise to misery. The more refined the joy, the more intense, the more penetrating the misery in its lack. This is what is being illustrated by this example here. See, very often, here's the thing. Today, at a certain point of time, certainly less than even a century back, one of the key problems facing us as a species was material resources, particularly availability of food. There were famines that struck and people were subject to it and they died. So that was a very tangible cause of misery. Today, in fact, more people die of obesity-related problems than from starvation, which means that our biological systems consume more than is good for it, and that gives rise to all kinds of problems, health problems, which is the person, at a certain point of time, as a species, we were accustomed to walking, exercising on a day-to-day basis, but today we all lead, to a great extent, sedentary lives, and that gives rise to certain health problems. So, the material needs have gone down, have been to a great extent fulfilled amongst a large number of people. But what has happened is that newer, more refined avenues of pleasure and joy have opened up. And while these have opened up, the absence of these avenues causes heartburn and jealousy and pain and anger amongst people who do not have it. It's essentially the idea that, there is this group of other people who are somehow or the other getting these joys of life, but I am not. For whatever reason. It may be that those people have worked very hard, or it may be that their parents worked hard and gave some benefits of these joys to their children. But whatever be the reason, the fact that somebody else is having certain avenues of joy opened to them, and I am being deprived of those, is a cause of misery to me. So, avenues of joy, as they open up, they simultaneously open up avenues of misery. Presence implies joy, its absence implies misery. In itself, an opportunity is neither good nor bad. It is how we decide to react to them that decides whether our mind is going to be happy, sad, or calm. And what is being suggested here is that treat these as avenues of work for a larger purpose. An avenue which has come up, developed is not for me to grab it to add joy just to myself. If I do that, I am simultaneously opening myself up to the possibility of sorrow that is inevitable when this source goes away. If, on the other hand, I invest in that opportunity as a chance to increase my awareness, to increase my calm, level-headed understanding of a larger reality, then the opportunity has served its purpose. It has neither elicited some frivolous ululation or some frivolous effervescence of joy, nor has it opened me up to a possibility of experience of pain when that source goes away. What has happened is that opportunity has been used. It has been used to extract from it quiet, clear knowledge of a larger system. And if one has done that, then an opportunity has served its purpose. See, if one is working in a system, as all of us are, then certain kinds of work done with dedication, let's say, it's going to bring basically praise from some quarters, and then there will be other people who will think that no, this is not really good, and they will oppose it, and they will, instead of praising, they will curse. Any kind of work typically is going to bring both these opposites in its train. What are we to do? If we attach our attention to the praise it brings from one, or the curses it brings from another, then we will be compelled to oscillate between these two emotional reactions. In other words, we will be stuck at a superficial aspect, the very, very superficial aspect of our mind. We will have missed the opportunity of probing into that occasion for excavating something that is real, something that is stable, something that is more permanent than this emotional reaction of joy or pain. What one is being therefore asked here to do is to understand that these polar opposites of good and bad, of life and death, of pain and joy, are aspects of the same reality, and probe into what that reality is about. That's the purpose of this whole business. Doing one's job with dedication, whatever one is doing it with dedication, is the best means available to us at this particular moment to probe into this what we call real. What we call real is this job at hand. This moment, what we are doing right here, right now, is what is real to us. Can we grasp that reality in the most intense way possible? If so, then these aspects of good and bad, aspects of joy and pain, aspects of life and death even, basically aspects of worry about the future and regret about the past, these will start ceasing to have that much control over our mind. We will develop a greater poise and be able to accept all that comes our way without constantly judging them. This is good, this is bad, this person is good, this person is bad, this person is a friendly person, this person is going to beat me, etc., etc. Yeah? All these polarities with which we look at the world and waste our mental energy, that wastage is going to be decreased by focusing on the present, on the job at hand and doing it with full dedication. We'll resume again next week. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.